Joining us now, one half of the Rink-Wide Duo with Andrew Wadden. They were busy last night after the loss to the Penguins. Our Canucks reporter, Mr. Jeff Paterson. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. Not as busy as Spencer Martin, but busy.
No. So both our friends Thomas Drance and Kevin Woodley have put out tweets calling it the worst defensive performance of the year, and not necessarily just the Canucks, but maybe across the league. What says you, Jeff?
Yeah, I saw both of those and the numbers that back it up, and it's hard to argue. It's unbelievable. And think about this. Like Pittsburgh, 20 first-period shots last night. So I know that a lot was made of the squandered lead. But honestly, did anybody feel the 3-0 lead was safe that early in the hockey game? And the minute the Canucks were shorthanded, you kind of got the feeling that the door was being opened and the red carpet was being rolled out for the Penguins to come all the way back in the hockey game. But I would just add this to the fact that Pittsburgh ended up with 50 shot attempts in the hockey game without Chris Letang and Jeff Petrie, their two best offensive defensemen. Like, how much worse could it have been? I'm not sure that anybody really wants to go there and find an answer to that question, but the Penguins were short-staffed. Both teams without their starting goaltenders. I think that played into the outcome and the way that the game went, but just keep in mind that Letang and Petrie both out of that Pittsburgh lineup, and they still went to town and did what they did to the Vancouver Canucks.
For those that missed the story on the Pens going into that game, they went and attended the funeral of Chris Letang's father in Montreal prior to the game, arrived very late up until, in relation to game time. It might have accounted for their slow start, but it's almost like, Jeff, they were like, well, we can't lose the game because we were showing solidarity for our teammate. We've got to pick ourselves up. And as soon as they decided they were going to do that, like, they romped for what was about 2 periods with the work. There was a bit of score effects pressure from the Canucks late, but like, it was men amongst boys from the 3-0 point onward.
Yeah, and look, the book is out on the Canucks. Like, lean on them, right?
Yeah,
when you're down, just lean on them. And like, I don't mean that as an insult. That's just the reality. This league is so heavily scouted. Teams know the issues that have plagued this group all season long. They know that they haven't protected leads. They know they can't defend. And teams damn well know that the Canucks cannot kill a penalty, and they gave up 2 more last night. And their penalty kill hits the 40-game mark at 67.8% for the season, and I just don't see any hope of it improving, especially like if they trade Bo Horvat. Like, who's going to win the faceoffs? And that's probably just going to compound the problems. Not that Bo has been an ace penalty killer, because I think he's part of the issue there. I'm not singling him out, but clearly collectively, this is a team that went and brought in Curtis Lazar and Ilya Mikheyev in the offseason. Ethan Bear has been added to the mix. This time last year, Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes were just getting their feet wet as penalty killers in the NHL. So, the penalty kill was dreadful under Travis Green at the end, but Bruce Boudreau's made some changes, the organization's made some changes, and nothing has changed. 67.8% at the 40-game mark. Last night was the 8th time in 40 games that they have given up 2 or more. Like, you just can't keep spotting your opponents that many special teams goals, and so Pittsburgh scored 2 on the power play, and then maybe the crushing play of all was Bo Horvat missing that empty net 4-on-4 in a 3-all tie, and of all people, Bo Horvat missing a pretty much empty net, and then at the other end, Malkin picks the pocket of Ilya Mikheyev, and Mikheyev's been a pretty honest player, pretty sound player. I don't know what he was doing there under duress and some pressure, but find an outlet. Don't just basically stop on the play, and Malkin swoops in and steals the puck, and OEL didn't defend on that play either very well. So, that's been one of the storylines 2 through 40 has just been, mistakes, way too many, but nobody seems to bail a teammate out. Like, they compound their problems. Like, OEL could have defended the 2-on-1 there better, and he didn't, and puck goes right through him and into the back of the net. So round and around it goes. But I just, at 3-0, like, I was marveling at the start. It was dreadful goaltending by Casey DeSmith, but I just, for not even a second, did I think that the Canucks were home and cooled out in that hockey game.
But hey, they play high-event hockey now. We're all happy about that, right?
Well,
like, there's lots going on in a Vancouver Canucks game. Miss a minute, miss a lot.
And if that was part of the plan, if that was part of a rebuild, by all means, like, this would be a great year for a rebuilding team, right? You're entertaining but still losing. If only they were trying to be where they are right now.
So I was just looking at this 40-game splits year over year to get a sense of how much worse the Canucks are defensively. The good news is how much better they are offensively, I suppose. They have scored 37 more goals, almost a goal per game better year over year from a year ago at the 40-game mark. but they've given up 47 more than they did at this time. So think about that, 37 more for, and 47, like that's insane. Like talk about high event. Yeah. Last year they had Thatcher Demko, and they prevented goals. They didn't do a great job of scoring. It was around this time of the year that Elias Paterson got his game back and started to move it into high gear. But, he was part of those offensive struggles in the early going. And obviously that hasn't been the case. And, two glorious shorthanded opportunities. Like, you'll take your chances with EP40 on breakaways more often than not, and yet he wasn't able to score. He had the one at 3-1 that would have made it 4-1 and helped the Canucks extend that lead again, and he didn't score there. So there were a bunch of turning points in that hockey game. Yeah, I mean, if you just sat back and you didn't really care who was going to win, star power. You had Evgeny Malkin stepping up and doing his thing. Sid scored a goal. Paterson had chances. Horvat, we talked about him. But it's just... I wonder what happens around the NHL when the Canucks are playing and people look at the out-of-town scoreboard and think, like, seriously? Again? Like, these guys have given up 5. They've scored 4. Like, it's just, this is who they are at the 40-game mark. And again, I don't see it changing. I think who they are is who they are. They were probably who they were at the 20-game mark. And in the last 20 games, this team is 10-10. So they've just scuffled along. They've kicked the can down the road. They're 10 wins, 10 losses in their last 20 games. And yeah, I mean, that's marginally better than the 10-7-1 start to the season. But we know 500, in a short span over the long haul, 500 is nothing in the NHL. And so there is just so much more work, so much more improvement that needs to be done with this group.
I talked yesterday about Thatcher Demko's somewhat imminent return, sometime in the not too distant future anyway, with him back on the ice and such. Is there any worry that he could screw this up further by being better? Like, I wrote yesterday how they should want to prioritize the revitalization of the key goaltender here. However, what if he's too good? And there's no bringing this team into the playoffs, but he is good enough to make a difference in a game like last night. Perhaps if he wears the Superman cape, stands on his head, there's a world in which the Canucks can win last night's game. And if he does that enough, the Canucks get the 17th overall draft pick again. Like, do they have to consider that a little bit as he nears his return?
Sure, and I would think in the short term, the organization should just keep him out until after the All-Star break. Like, just make a decision right now. Great that he's on the trip. Good to see him back in uniform. I want to see him healthy. But yeah, I mean, for that very reason, why wouldn't you just organizationally say, we are going to take no chances with your health, short or long term here. You're going to continue to have time to work with Ian Clark and work your way back in. And, after the All-Star break, at that point, we can figure out a plan. The plan cannot be playing him every night. Like, it can't be. This guy's coming back from an injury and hasn't played now. And by then, it would be over 2 months. So I hope prudence is the play here on the part of the organization. Last year, because they were knocking on the door of a playoff spot, I got it. There was an urgency, and I didn't like it necessarily, but I understood it. He was their horse. They were going to ride him. But there's none of that this time around, and so it should all be about preserving his health while trying to build him back up. Is there a danger that he could ruin things? He's going to be better than he was at the start of the season. He has to be. He wasn't, yes, he was that bad, but that's not Thatcher Demko. I'm not sure what was going on there with him, and he was part of the issue. I mean, he can't, and he wouldn't, I don't think, shirk that responsibility. He's a better goalie than he showed at the outset of this season, so I would expect that he would deliver a better performance, but again, a better performance behind this defense. I don't even know what that means or what it looks like or if that matters. So I hope that they are smart with his return. I want to believe that they're going to be.
Moving along, Jeff, to a couple of items that have come up since we last talked to you on Monday. What did you make of that Jim Rutherford interview in the Pittsburgh column?
Yeah, there were a couple of things. One is a little surprised that he was willing to pour out his soul to a Pittsburgh reporter. He's been available here in Vancouver, although we haven't heard as much from him of late. I know Ben Kuzma talked to him for Peace in the Province about JT Miller and that outburst with the empty net and Colin Delia, but there really wasn't there weren't quotes about the overarching season and performance to this point. Obviously, he went on the Right Shoulder radio back in November when he blasted the coach. Jim Jim talks. Like, he'll talk. I mean, information that's coming out. It's clear. I think that he's talked to insiders around the National Hockey League and that kind of stuff. But I was just surprised that he was willing to have that interview. But he's got relationships. He worked there in Pittsburgh. He won there in Pittsburgh. So I guess if there was a market where he was going to sort of be an open book, it would be there. I was glad to see him acknowledge the frustration in this market. I'm still not sure that he grasped where the frustration ultimately is coming from. And I think you guys talked a little bit about that on your program yesterday. But I think it's good just to hear anybody that is in upper management at least acknowledge that this is a fan base that is getting angry and angrier by the day. The stuff about if it gets too much, maybe I'll just retire. That was curious. I mean, at some point he is going to retire, so he's not wrong in suggesting that. But I was trying to read between the lines to get a sense of whether there was something more there about, like, that's imminent. It's not my sense necessarily. I think this is a proud guy that has won before and wants to prove that, he's still got it. But it's pretty clear that he and his hockey club are a long way away from winning anything. Maybe not the draft lottery. So there was a fair bit in there, but he's generally been an open book. My issue, and when I go back to the weekend and the season ticket holder event, and I don't really want to belabor that, is that Patrik Allvin is the guy that we just don't hear from anymore. And I feel that's wrong. In a market like this one, a passionate fan base that wants some answers, demands some answers, is promised an audience with the GM, and then that doesn't happen. That wasn't a great look, but outside of After Hours, and the night he went on After Hours was a bad night all around. It was the 5-1 loss to Winnipeg in December. But that wasn't Patrik Allvin's finest 15 minutes. But that can't scare him away. This is part of your job, is to convey the message through the media to the fan base. And if you're not going to do it directly to the fan base at the season ticket holder event, then absolutely there has to be more availability. And we know that he plays it close to the vest. He doesn't seem to enjoy the interaction with the media. That's fine. That's fair enough. But there comes time, like, it's the midway mark of the season in Tampa on Thursday. Like, most times a general manager will make himself available for some sort of midterm review and overview of where the team is and where it's got to go and the scouting meetings that are going on and all that kind of stuff. And we haven't heard, like, he has not been made available to anybody, one-on-one or in a scrum, in the local market since October. And I don't know, I find that really strange and quite frankly, quite disappointing.
Rutherford's awfully wistful in that Pittsburgh column. He turns 74 next month. Let me ask you the Bodog poll question. Will he be with the Canucks next year?
I'm going to say yes. Yeah, I'm going to say that... Again, I think he's a proud guy that still believes that he can put together a winning team. I think it's apparent, and he made that clear too in the piece, that, I think they all had a sense of what they were getting themselves into, but once they were able to get in here and look at the books and absolutely unravel, well, they haven't done the unraveling part yet, but when they got knee-deep into what they were inheriting, essentially, I think they recognized that there was far more work to be done than maybe they had anticipated at the outset. And maybe some of that was coming in and not fully knowing, every player and his trade protection and all those types of things. Like, I'm sure they did a little bit of homework, both he and Allvin, but my hunch is once you got on the ground here, the task became even greater than they had anticipated. So I don't think Jim Rutherford strikes me as the kind of guy that's going to run from a challenge, but at the same time, I mean, he was the one that floated the retirement issue, and we know, so I do think he'll be here next year. I would say yes to that question, but beyond that, I would imagine all bets are off.
Yep. The pressures from the market, the pressures from above with the ownership group turning 74, and this is basically a wasted year. I'm not sure how much further ahead you got in the rebuild project, and you certainly didn't make the playoffs as you had hoped and intended.
The two veteran defensemen get a lot of scorn for their play last night. Now, one of them takes care of itself. Again, I think Tyler Myers is eminently tradable, particularly this summer, because he's effectively a free player under the cap. With the dollars and cents of it.
Sheet, yeah.
Even if not so on the cap. But just 1 year left. I'm not worried about the Tyler Myers situation. It sorts itself out now. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is a different thing. Jeff, I don't know how creative the Canucks can possibly get here. I know I've heard Drant suggest that maybe the buyout is the option because at least it's immediate relief because of the way the weird way that it's rolled out, as much as you're setting yourself up for an interminable amount of time of OEL cap hits. After that, it does give you a year or two of relief. I mean, I wonder if he can get cajoled into retirement is the only possible way out here. But I mean, the OEL contract is now, today, even worse than we thought so the day of the trade, which we thought so at the time was pretty bad.
Yeah, I think the retirement talk, like, look, he signed a contract. I don't begrudge anybody that can get that deal, and he's not going to walk away from, what's left on that. He's just not. We used to talk about that with Louis, and this is money that they are owed, and so, you hate to say, like, the long-term injury, way out, and we've seen that elsewhere, but he's healthy. I don't think you can get that creative. I don't think there's enough there that somehow you can place him on LTIR for the duration of the contract. Yeah, it's a struggle, and you saw it in the third period last night. Like, they had to split those two. Like, and their hands are tied a little bit because I think they want to get a good look at Quinn Hughes and Ethan Bear together. But when you do that, you're left with four others that aren't necessarily up to the task. And I guess right now, like, I would take OEL and Myers apart from each other rather than together because it just doesn't work. And Tyler Myers' decision-making, I don't know, Blake, I think you've got a little more faith in him than I do as terms of, I wonder if there will be another NHL contract for Tyler Myers beyond this one. His decision-making and his in-zone defending, to me, are not at an NHL level. And so maybe he's tradable, but it would only be an acquiring team that's looking to, pad the cap to get to the floor. Like, I don't see a good, like, I know there's been talk about this trade deadline and, a good team, he could be a third pairing. I'm not so sure, guys. Like, when I watch him on a nightly basis, and even last night, that third goal, and I know the video is circulating of him not paying attention to the faceoff. He's talking to Kuzmenko as the puck is being dropped. Like, this is the NHL. Every split second matters. And you're not paying attention to what's going on. And sure enough, Malkin wins the draw. Zucker gets the shot. And Tyler Myers is a half step slow to get out to him. And puck goes in. So, yeah, I don't know where it goes from here, quite frankly. But I'm of the camp, like, in the short term, I would sit these guys down on occasion, and maybe the organization just feels it can't deliver that kind of message to guys who, in OEL, wears a letter, and Myers, if one of the other guys is out, he wears a letter. Their performance hasn't warranted them being every night players in this lineup. Now, the replacements, Kyle Burroughs and Riley Stillman, like, that's a different story for another day, but at this point, I'm not sure how much more of the play drops off with one or both of those guys in, and this wouldn't be a long-term thing, but I just use it as an example. On Sunday, in Carolina, they play a 7 p.m. Eastern Time Zone game in Florida on Saturday and 5 p.m. in Carolina on Sunday. So not even 24 hours between puck drop. It's the fifth and final stop on a 5-game and 8-night road trip with travel, like, against a really good and up-tempo team in Carolina. Like, what's that going to look like? Does OEL have to play that game? Like, could you not load manage and just say, hey, we're going to look at something different? It's, for one night, you're going to sit down. I know what we're paying you, but could you not make that case as an organization that it's in your best interest? And now the tankists are saying, no, keep playing these guys. Play them 30 minutes a night. Like, and I see that in my timeline an awful lot, but I don't know. Like, we've seen accountability in the form of healthy scratches up front with Garland and Kuzmenko and the threat for Brock Besser. But on defense, it's just same old night after night after night, and so are the results. So, I don't know. At some point, wouldn't you just seek to find something a little different here?
Well, to your point, if there keeps on being leaked out that they may buy some people out in the summer, they're not benching anybody. I mean, if you're at the point where you're ready to buy players out in the summer, like, wouldn't that player be benched from time to time during the season? You've got
maybe after the deadline you'll see that happen.
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
The problem with benching Myers right now is if there is anybody who's interested,
I'm not thinking Myers. I'm thinking OEL more than anything.
Well, yeah. I mean, do you think Stillman's better? Rinkwide's asking that as a poll at Rinkwide Van.
Well, I don't. I think it's a
Would
dead
you
heat.
healthy scratch him?
One guy's making what he is, and one guy's
really?
making.
You think Stillman is in the?
Yeah, I really do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff, Andrei Kuzmenko featured on Insider Trading yesterday. Pierre LeBrun reporting it's going to take $6 million plus if the Canucks are going to keep him away from unrestricted free agency. Sounds like, though, according to Rick Dollywall's reporting, that Dan Milstein, his agent, is willing to look at a bridge, a shorter-term deal that gets him out and into unrestricted free agency a second time before he turns 30. What do you think? Would you go $6 million per?
Well, I think we had a fair bit of this discussion last week, I think, when I said, like, it's been an incredible first half. He's been a great addition to the Canucks. It's been a first half, and he's been a nice addition to the Canucks. But there is a second half to the season. It's a remarkably small sample size. He has done everything that they've asked of him, but he wasn't very good last night, nor were many of his teammates. But he has to continue to do this over the second half of the season. It gets tougher in the second half of the season. They have to go from Pittsburgh. They have to go into Tampa. Tampa's got the second best home ice record in the league. The Carolina game that I talked about, like, he's got to show, he's got to step up and continue to do this if he truly believes, and Milstein believes, that he can be a $6 million player. So at this point, I think I would reserve judgment on that. To me, I think he needs to show. Now, again, they have a decision to make here, and the trade deadline isn't going to allow them, the full body of work over the second half of the season. I just wonder, though, if he did all that he did in the first half, but if his numbers slow over the second half, when the game gets tougher, it starts to emulate more of playoff hockey for a lot of the teams that are going to go to the postseason. Can he keep his scoring rates up? And if the answer is yes, then sure, they're going to have a leg to stand on. But if not, $6 million seems a little rich for me at that stage. But you're the Vancouver Canucks. You don't have much in the pipeline. You've got a guy who's got some chemistry with Elias Paterson. I do wonder what Elias Paterson thinking if they have a complete garage sale here and move all of these pieces out, because ultimately the organization has to prove to Elias Paterson that it's got this plan, that it can put a product on the ice that's going to allow him to have a chance to win here before too long. And I would think that that would be tough for Elias Pettersson to watch if the fire sale happens. How? Who? It's fine if they free up some cap space, but ultimately you got to use that cap space effectively, and to try to convince Elias Pettersson of a long-term plan when you don't have a concrete roster of players for him to get a sense of how they're going to go about building this thing. So, to me, a lot of this does tie back to Elias Pettersson and the case that they're going to have to lay out in front of him and his agents. And I would think he'd be pretty disappointed and disheartened to see a guy that he's had some chemistry with. It sounds like he's built a pretty good friendship with as well. But the organization has to do, I guess, what's best for it. And if it can get the buying price, I still think a first rounder is going to be rich for a guy like Kuzmenko, but at the same time, I mean, we've talked about, it's essentially a free player on the cap this year, and that would be pretty damn attractive to just about any team that's looking to add some scoring punch ahead of the trade deadline.
And that was LeBrun's thrust, that there are a lot of teams anxious on this player because he's the easiest cap fit of them all when you're looking at reinforcements scoring-wise up front. Marvelous stuff, Jeff. Thank you for this. We'll catch up soon.
Okay, guys. Thanks.